find it not easy to call myself a Muslim, even though I accepted Islam in 1984 to try to bring my insides in harmony with my outsides. So the affirmation there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. I can still say from my heart, and there is no God but God, and Christ is his messenger, also comes from my heart. I remember that when Muhammad had returned from defending himself and his followers to establish Islam, after his opponents had grown tired of simply spitting and kicking him for 13 years, and had decided to try to kill him because his followers had become too great in number, and he then had to defend himself. He said that they returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad, which is inside men and women as they tried to become more human, to fight in the heart. And I take that principle across all of my spiritual endeavour. The exterior is less than the interior. So I'm not a good Muslim. It's hard for me, even in all honesty, to call myself a Muslim. I can say I accepted Islam. And the other principle which I hang on to is the saying of Muhammad that when he was here, 100% of what he said had to be done in the future, then 10% would be enough. And so I hold the insides to be greater than the outsides, and I hang on to the 10% of endeavour to practice the prophetic instructions. At the end of his life, Muhammad was very concerned that the people around him should feed back to him that he had delivered his message. Have I delivered my message clearly and successfully? And he asked that question 3 times before he left this place. This idea of message carrying is vital, it seems to me, across all of spiritual manifestation. It's at the heart of the 12-step vehicle as it presents across the global fellowships. Carry a message, do your best, and leave the results of that message to God alone. And it is message carrying that is most important. The message I have to carry, I've tried to establish in the previous videos. This correlation between an individual that gets stuck and damaged and the collectives and the nations which exhibit very similar symptoms of illness. I've tried to call this phenomenon stuck addiction, to try to give some help and some message to clarify a diagnosis. Now, the difficulty that the leaders face in business and in politics is the same that an individual faces when they are brought to the point of accepting powerlessness and unmanageability in their lives. That is, that the leading function inside the individual, inside that inner constitution which is collapsing, becomes very frightened. Now, the leading function is necessary. In an individual, the leading function has to carry on after the catharsis of accepting powerlessness and unmanageability and accepting that the behaviours have become insane. Insane in the Einstein definition of doing the same thing, expecting a different result. The fact that the leading function in the individual constitution remains and succeeds and flourishes again has been proven over 80 years now of successful recovery dynamics. How to translate that success to the boardroom and to governments is a challenge. There's only one global leader that comes to mind who has managed to get over the terror of actually telling the truth, and that was Bill Clinton, post the Monica Lewinsky affair, when he faced his terror, initially politically, by saying he did not have anything to do with the accusations, and then eventually full transparency, which had an extraordinary effect because it disarmed his enemies completely. The people warmed to him and voted him in for a second term because the people, the constituents of the political constituency of the constitutions, are yearning for truth. People are hardwired for truth, and they know when they're not being told the truth, which is why in the first world sometimes up to 60% of the electorate don't vote or are switched off, and so roughly the 40 or even perhaps let's say 50% at most of people who do vote, the winning parties get 40-50% of that 40-50% that votes, and they think they claim a mandate. There's nowhere near a mandate. What the political leaders find very hard to do is to actually be transparent and tell the truth. Winston Churchill, in a wartime situation, told as much of the truth as he could and said that he must trust the people, and the people warmed and rallied to him because the truth was self-evident. It was physically evident. What we're facing today is a situation more serious than the Second World War, but the people are not joining in with the leadership because the leadership are not telling the truth. They are trying to pretend desperately that it's business as usual, that the Constitution hasn't broken, that the banks haven't broken, that the whole thing is not floundering around in a dire and desperate place. If they were to come to the electorate and say, we are powerless to be able to do anything about this, it's going to be very hard to manage this, almost impossible, in the same way that Winston Churchill had to come to the people and say, I can promise you nothing but blood and fighting. Then the people would respond, but they can't do it. They can't seem to do it. They had a chance in 2009-10 in the UK, in the Hung Parliament, when they could have established a full all-party government, which would have sent a huge message across the bowels of the market forces, the venal market forces, which are described correctly in the film The Wolf of Wall Street, and it would have gone a long way to help clarify the situation. They daren't do it. The most they could do was to nail the government down for 5 years, because they knew they were facing a situation of inquiry, of MP expenses scandals, of the Leveson inquiry, the phone hacking, the sex exposés, the celebrity sex exposés, the church meltdowns with abuse and internal strife and arguments, and they knew that if they didn't nail the constitution down, then it would simply get blown away. And the 70% of the GDP around the square mile is hindering and hampering the UK's ability to really respond to the situation. All they can do is try to redouble efforts to impose the old paradigms on the problems that are presenting. The old ways will not work anymore. The old ways have gone. The monetary system is not fit for purpose. It was just about fit for purpose perhaps in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. It's now grown into a Ponzi style chimera parody of pretense at serving mankind. Money is made for man, not man for money, in the same way that Christ said that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Everything on the outside in this world must serve the inside, because, as Muhammad said, the inside is the greater battle, it is the greater place. So how to bring about a message, a spiritual message that can have any kind of possibility of helping the situation and not simply making matters worse. Jesus Christ appeared. He disappeared. He will reappear. Those simple words are at the core of the Christian faith. They are at the core of the Islamic faith. Neither Christian nor Muslim could argue with those simple words. Jesus Christ appeared. He disappeared. He will reappear. The only area that they can disagree on is a theological argument about the nature of his disappearance. What's it matter? He disappeared. One would think that Christians and Muslims would be much more concerned and united in their shared article of faith that he will reappear. Do they really think that they would recognise this reappearance, that he would be pleased to reappear amongst their preparation for that event? I'll leave that question open. But what message from the unseen would be useful, helpful, galvanizing, healing, informative, loving, merciful, across the face of the difficulties which appear to be presenting across the constitutions of the people, the corporations, and the nations around this world today. The message, as I've tried to say in previous short videos, starts with a diagnosis. People, collectives, countries are stuck. And in that stuckness, there is the possibility of seeing things more clearly. This movement to seeing things more clearly depends wholly upon the leading awareness in an individual accepting the diagnosis, if the individual is being treated, For a company, it depends upon the board accepting a diagnosis of a situation, and for countries and nations, it depends upon the government accepting a view and a diagnosis of the problems facing them. If the diagnosis is not accepted, there is nothing can be done. Everything on this planet that is manifest to the five senses as they receive the exterior world, everything is in the lesser place. All materiality is the lesser dimension. The greater dimension is the interior function of life, the invisibility. All power is in the invisibility as it breathes into the visibility. Everybody knows that at some level. In the past, shamans, poets, Sufis, mystics have left messages to say that this world is not what it appears to be, that another place is more important, not altogether visible for most people. And a source from where we come from and a destination to where we will go to. Most people, through the centuries, have picked up those messages and poems and looked at it and said, jog on, I've got things to do. Fast forward to today, to the world of quantum physics, to the Hubble telescope, and the information is that the universe must contain around 90% of invisible dark matter, black matter, dark energy. Otherwise, none of the physical laws that are presently known can cohere and work. So what the old priests and shamans and Sufis and dervishes and poets called the beloved, the quantum physicist calls dark matter. Makes no difference. It's the same phenomenon. The invisible realm contains the supporting creativity for the exterior world of the sense perception to exist. On the ratio about 9-1, say. So whatever we see outside is a tenth, like an iceberg. It's the same for an individual as it is for all material phenomena. The human being lives in their mental realm. They live in a physical body, and they have an immaterial powerhouse of emotions, of feelings, of inspiration, of thoughts, of love, none of which are visible. If a person gets cut off from their access to their own invisibility, as that relates to general invisibility, then that mental realm is stuck in a mental physical box. How to connect that person the power of their own invisibility is the challenge. First, the individual has to see the effects of their cut-off, their hamster wheel habits, their fears, their anxieties, their hopelessnesses, the symptoms of their existential malady, which eventually brings them to the point of disturbance, habits that become deadly, addictions that become a deep sickness, a powerlessness and an unmanageability, and a deep, deep unhappiness. Around all of that, there can be deniability, an insistence that things are all right, that we'll get through, a false optimism, an inflated kind of reprogramming, a neuro-linguistic programming of buzzword, of mantra, of mission statement, of willpower, that simply eventually makes matters worse. The message is simple. Spiritual forces control and manage material forces everywhere, whatever the appearance. By that, I mean invisibility controls visibility. We come from the invisible to the visible, from the invisible to the visible. Our minds, our personalities are in the middle. And to be healthy, we have to turn from the visible to the invisible, from the visible to the invisible. And if we walk and breathe connected authentically to both, then we walk through this life in a certain manner. If we get stuck and it's all in the visible, then eventually we'll go mad. If we get stuck and it's all in the invisible, then eventually we'll go mad. We are designed to turn between the visible and the invisible, visible and the invisible, for the time that we're here. It is an evacuation of our physical interface that keeps us healthy. If we do not evacuate the processes of our visibility, we will become ill. If we do not evacuate the processes of our invisible interface, then we will become ill. It's no mystery that the highest symbol of the Egyptian culture was the scarab beetle, the dung beetle, that rolled away waste. All processes here have an element of detritus, of waste product. How we deal with our waste products is of vital importance. We live in the mental realm, in the middle, between the physical and the spiritual, between the finite and the infinite. The environs of our mental realm take their order from that mental positioning. The environmental appears from the inside out. Change the mental and the environmental will change by itself. Change does not happen from the outside in. Everything comes from the inside out, from the invisible to the visible, from the invisible to the visible. Problems are solved from the invisible interface, out into the visible. individuals, collectives, and now collectives of collectives have lost contact with the invisible realm, where 9/10 of the power resides. How can the invisible give a coherent message to the stuck visibilities? This is a message from the invisible to the visible.